Hello and welcome to another omnivorous book review. So for this review I'm back in my comfort zone of science fiction, and this particular science fiction is written by Bob Shaw. Now I don't know if you've heard of Bob Shaw, and until last month I'm not sure that I ever had. He wrote between 1950s or 60s I think, and he died in 1996, and he is a fine writer. Now, I'm not sure that I never read anything of his, because the writing style at times does sound familiar, but sometime last month I saw a review by another YouTuber and I thought, hey, he sounds like a good author. And just coincidentally, the very next week a seller in the area that I often buy of posted a marketplace ad with several Bob Shaws, so I went and picked them up, and this is one of them, Bob Shaw, A Wreath of Stars. So first of all, we've got this rather nice pan edition. I think that title thing is called a lozenge, and I do find them quite attractive. I like the heft and the weight of the book. I like the whole printing style. It's fun to read, I don't know, feeling wise. And this one's got that rather beautiful cover art of strange alien-esque ghosts coming out of a tunnel. And you've got little sparkles in the tunnel, which you probably can't see from the reflection, but the tunnel in which the scene that this art is based on is a diamond mine. I love the fact that the artwork is excellent. It's good enough to hang on your wall. I love the fact that whoever did the artwork actually knew what was happening in the book, and they must have. Okay, so Bob Shaw. He was a UK author. I think he was from Ireland originally. He lived in America for a while, and he's got very, very nice writing. That was the one thing that really impressed me throughout the book. It's like some people's style is bombastic, his isn't. It's just very, very good. It feels professional, it feels well thought out, well edited. It's not a fast read. While it's not a huge book, it is, let me tell you this for sure, it is 190 pages exactly, but it isn't a fast read because the language itself has its own structure and its own internal beauty, so you can't just flash through it. It isn't writing that is just meant to get the story off the page and into your brain. It's writing that's meant to have its own cadence, and I really enjoyed that. I was in the mood for some good writing. Now, if this author is new to you like it is to me, I think you should go out and get some. Get you some Bob Shaw, I think is what some people would say. Now, the story was kind of an instant grab. Not a flashy instant grab, but well done. And it starts... So you've got the story and you've got these characters, and their interaction isn't immediately obvious. So our first character is Gilbert Snook, and if you read about this book online, it will describe Gilbert Snook as the character who thinks of himself as an anti-neutrino. Yes, that's right. Chapter 1 starts with him. Gilbert Snook sometimes thought of himself as being the exact social equivalent of a neutrino. He was an aircraft engineer and therefore not formally schooled in nuclear physics, but he knew the neutrino to be an elusive particle, one which interacted so faintly with the normal hadronic matter of the universe that it could flit straight through Earth without hitting or disturbing one other particle. Now, Snook was living his life much like that. He moved from one country to another, we gather mostly small countries in Africa, doing small jobs, not interacting too heavily with people. Mainly his desire in life was to be undisturbed and undisturbing. Now from Snook we go to the thing that that first introduction kind of introduces us to, because Snook's big adventure, if you will, in life occurs when anti-neutrinos first came on the scene. And that takes us to Thornton. I think he's an amateur astronomer, and he's looking into space and he sees this thing that can't be there. Now, so you've got this rogue star that eventually becomes named as Thornton star, and it's rocketing in toward the solar system straight towards Earth, but it's made of anti-neutrinos. So it's expected that when it arrives, it'll basically pass straight through because neutrinos and antineutrinos don't actually connect. But instead what's happened, and it's observed by yet another good character that's throughout the book, Ambrose, is that as it approaches the solar system, instead of going straight through as you'd expect from a planet with nothing to attract it, it goes on a curved axis. So there's something in the solar system that is attracting antineutrinos, but essentially it then passes through the system as expected, with no effect on Earth. Now all of this part is possible because in this world that's postulated by Bob Shaw, which is very much like our world, or rather more like his world. So I think that's it's a 70s style world. There is this one invention called magnilucent glasses. They look like blue glass, but what they enable you to do is see light where there isn't light, or there isn't very much light. I'm not quite clear on that. But basically it allows you to also see antimatter. It's with these tiny little touches that Bob Shaw creates a world which has got the science, because there's good astronomy in this book, and I realised reading it that I haven't been reading that many books with a lot of astronomy, so that was fun. And then you've got this invention of the blue glasses, is very much science fiction. And then you've got this whole very subtly done construct. And that is very well written, as I already mentioned. So, after the antineutrino stars passed and it's left its small marks on the world, Gilbert Snook is working in some tiny country and a revolution comes, and in all previous accounts and events he could escape from any unpleasantness before it happened. In this one he gets kind of caught up. And he gets on a plane that takes him to another country without his passport. The country is called Barandisio. It's a tiny African country that doesn't really exist. It doesn't really exist, I think, in our world, but it doesn't really exist in their world either. And I actually really like this. So, I recently read an interesting article about countries that aren't recognised by the UN or other countries. One of them was Somaliland. It split off from Somalia. It claims to be its own country, but is not recognised by the UN or anyone else, pretty much. And there's surprisingly more than half a dozen countries like that around the world. They've split off. They believe they're a country. No one else necessarily does. A few of them work up to independence slowly. And that is what Barandisi or Barandisio or whatever it is trying to do. It's a tiny African country. The person who is the head of the country, the president or whatever, wants to become recognised by the UN. That's his one goal. The other ultimate ruler is an army man who doesn't like Snook at all. Now when Snook got there, he arrived in a plane that had been basically stolen by the pilot, not himself, from another country, and he refused to service it. So now he's virtually a prisoner in this country. He is making his living, which is paid mostly in gin and coffee, which I can totally empathise with, by teaching the miners who work in the diamond mines, haha, spoiler, engineering and fixing various things around the place. And again, he's become this, what he wants to be, this virtually anonymous, almost contactless person just drifting through life with no intersections. That stops when the guy who runs the mines, George Murphy, comes up to him and says people have been seeing ghosts in the mines and they trust you and they want you to investigate. They're refusing to go down. George Murphy is a symptom of Barandisio, or whatever this country is called, and that, in this way, is one of the few ways in which this book is dated a little bit, because you've got all these people who've established their own country, and in their effort to be recognised by the UN and other countries around the place, they've all ditched their traditional or tribal names, and they're giving themselves names like George Murphy. I don't think that'll sit too well with a lot of people in this day and age, but I think they're probably not the people who read classic sci-fi, so that should be okay. Generally speaking, I'd say that Wreath of Stars has dated virtually not at all. The way the plot is constructed, the characters are individualistic. If you take it as a book that's written in its era in the 70s and is not trying to be in 2020 or anything like that, you will see a book that is very comfortable in its own identity, or at least that's the way it felt to me. So Snook at first doesn't want anything to do with these ghosts, but he does eventually go down to the mines, and here's how these magnilucent glasses have affected the future. Instead of the mine, which is described as a very modern mine, having any lighting, it has no lighting. Anyone who works there basically puts on magnilucent glasses, goes underneath, and with them they see in this blue radiance. I really like the way Shaw describes the way you see through them. It's obviously inspired by night vision goggles or telescopes, but it's blue rather than green, which I liked. Anyway, Snook goes down there and he goes to the same place, and all of a sudden these ghostly, I think it starts with a bird, or doesn't it? Or does the bird come later? Anyway, these ghostly blue shapes rise out the floor, and they're clearly aliens. They're bipedal, they look kind of humanish, and they're wearing clothes, but they're clearly not human. Their arrangement of features is completely different. Now, Snook, among all the things he does have, is a very strong survival instinct. So when he takes photographs of these, he doesn't admit to the president of the country or the military guy who really doesn't like him that he's got these pictures. Instead, he sends them to a media friend, and only when the entire rest of the world knows that they're these ghosts is he safe from operation, because these people basically want the mines to keep going and they want the money to keep flowing. They want those miners to go back down there. The miners are going, no, there's ghosts. We know a ghost when we see one, and we're not going down there. Probably the military dictatorship attitude would have been to kill miners until the ones that were left were too scared not to. But they can't do that because the entire world now knows about it. Now, the military dictator style character wouldn't care, but the president who wants to become one with the UN does. So you've got all these different little conflicts. And that is when we get some new characters walk in. Ambrose is described earlier in the story. He runs a planetarium, and he's mainly a rich kid who wants recognition and fame, and this is he sees as his chance to get it. There's a couple of other characters in there which I'm not going to go into because I'm giving away a lot about this book, and I hope I'm giving away enough that most people who listen to this will be really intrigued and go, wow, Bob Shaw, I've got to read some, because I think it's a bit of a shame that an author who's got this many things going for them isn't as well known as many others. I'm not saying that he should be quite as well known as, say, Clarke or Heinlein, who were incredibly big wheels in science fiction in their day and wrote many books, but this author writes beautifully. The worst writing in this book is still better than about 70% of Heinlein, and I'll go so far as to say at Clarke's best, him and Shaw are sort of neck to neck in the actual writing and reading experience. I know that's a big call, but Clarke and I are hit or miss, and Bob Shaw was 100% hit with every single word and every single page of this book, so needs more recognition. Hope this video can do one small step towards further recognition. Now, while there's a lot of social and individual commentaries that are happening in this book, it gives me the feeling that Shaw wasn't trying to make any points, not about countries or dictatorships or anything else. He just saw all this stuff and turned it into a wonderful backdrop for his story. And the backdrop and the story intertwine to such an extent that you really can't separate them. You don't have this feeling that in some books you might get of a character walks onto your scene and then the author does this thing to give them a bit of character so you know who they are, and then they go, done with that, and off he goes. No, the characters in Shaw are totally interwoven with themselves and embedded in the story, and interwoven with the other characters in a way that I found really, really engaging from start to finish. one thing about these characters is his character description seems to be based on their aims and goals. Like we first introduced to Gilbert Snook in that basically he wants to be a human neutrino. He wants to contact with nothing. And then we have Ambrose, and we're basically given his aims and goals in that he wants recognition and fame, which he feels that he hasn't really got, and he knows he kind of doesn't deserve. So the aims and goals of the individual characters are what really bring them to the forefront of your experience while you're reading them, and I love that. The ending, or at least the last quarter of the book, is brilliant, and I'm not going to tell you what it is. It is unexpected. I did not expect where Gilbert Snook went. I did not expect where the contact with the other world went. I'm not going to describe what that other world was doing and where it was, but they do eventually get called Avernians, and the way that is developed is subtle but amazing, and I think you need to know all about it. And I think you need to know all about it, not from me, but from going out, finding a Wreath of Stars in this beautiful pan edition if you can, but in another edition if you can't, and read it. And then tell me I was right. Or tell me I was wrong, if that's how you feel. But in any case, read this book if you like classic science fiction, or if you like literature for that matter, because there's so much about this book that ticks many, many boxes. I am delighted to have read it. Thank you to whichever YouTuber who I've now forgot first told me about it. And have a great day and read good books. And my next review is going to be for an exceptionally good book. No spoilers.